We actually purchased expired food. We drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning because it was cheaper than real milk, and we really struggled. In my first year in real estate, I was still living at home with mom. I made about $8,000. My second year in real estate, I made about $10,000. But my third year in real estate, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was really good money. I met a man that taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology, and how really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is just that. In 2006, my net worth went up 17 million US dollars while I slept. And I got a head so big, I thought I was a real estate god. And you know when that happens, God or the universe will give you a nice little slap. Well, that was 2008 for me. I ended up losing $50 million conservatively in 2008 and 9. You know, fast forward to today, I'm blessed to host the largest real estate podcast really in the world for commercial real estate. In my lifetime, I've owned 2,000 houses that I've rented out long-term in 3 states here in the United States. And I ultimately ended up building an amazing, really mansion on the beach here in Sarasota, Florida, where I live. 10,000 square foot home, 3-story home, a magnificent home. And I got really depressed. I'm like, what is going on? I've just achieved success like times 1,000. My beautiful family's inside sleeping. I've got this amazing home. I had the cars, the Maserati, the Mercedes, and, the boats and the jet skis and all the stupid stuff I thought was important. And how could I be depressed? And we bought frozen turkeys and toys for their kids and a whole meal and a whole bunch of stuff for these families. And the third family changed my life. We went up to this shack. It was really a shack that this woman, Hispanic woman, was living in with her 5 children. And she came out and saw all the food on the porch and all the things on the porch, and she started crying. Her children came out, and 2 of the older ones started crying, and I started crying, and I was hooked.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Bolgar Capital Podcast. I am your host Rod Khleif, and today we are with Rod Khleif. Although digitally, Rod is a US-based real estate investor who really has one of the most inspiring and extraordinary stories I've ever heard. More precisely, he has built an empire, real estate empire, back before 2008, which consisted of over 800 properties, most of which were single-family properties and some were multi-family properties. One of the most interesting things that you're going to hear in this podcast today is that he lost it all in 2008, not because he was too exposed to leverage. In fact, he had a very low percentage. You'll hear exactly how much in the podcast. But he was just way too invested in single-family properties, which is a very interesting conclusion that you're going to take from this podcast. And the basic ideology of Rod is that you should not invest so much in single-family properties, but in multi-family properties, something that we've been preaching for quite a long time, but you will hear exactly why in today's podcast, as well as many other things, not so much real estate related, but more mindset related, just the way to think properly about the world, about yourself, which will really make you expand further in terms of your abilities and in terms of your results. So it's going to be a very interesting podcast. I assure you of that. And before we continue, I would just like to prompt you to like the video. Of course, if you like it by the end of it. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more information and content like that. Let's dive right into this podcast with Rod. Hello, Rod. Thank you once again for being a part of the Bolgar Capital Podcast. I hope you're doing all right. We're going to start things off immediately because I know your time is very precious. So the most important thing that I always like to ask my guests is, why should the audience listen to you today? I mean, who are you? Where do you come from? What is your story? Who are you right now? And who do you want to be? I know it's a very general question, but I would be very grateful if you can elaborate from the start.
Very general, but also very direct, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to give you my history. I'm a Dutch immigrant. I was born in the Netherlands, wooden shoes, windmills, and immigrated to the United States when I was 6 years old with my brother Albert, my mother Svancia, and we ended up in Denver, Colorado. And we didn't have much growing up. I wore hand-me-down clothes. We actually purchased expired food that had expired back. They had an expired food store back then, believe it or not. And we drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning because it was cheaper than real milk. And we really struggled. But I'm sure that you've got listeners that have had it harder than I did and maybe even have it harder now with all the economic uncertainty. But I knew I wanted more. And luckily, my mom had an incredible work ethic. So she babysat kids so we'd have enough money to eat. And with her babysitting money, we always had a house full of children that she was babysitting. But with her money, she invested in real estate. And the first real estate purchase she made was directly across the street from us. When I was about 14 years old, she paid $30,000 for this house across the street. And then when I was 17, she told me that it had gone up in value $20,000. She'd made $20,000 basically in her sleep. And this was 1977 when $20,000 was a lot of money. And I said, "What? You made $20,000? You didn't do anything? Forget college. I'm going to get into real estate." So I got into real estate. And my first year in real estate, I was still living at home with mom. I made about $8,000. My second year in real estate, I made about $10,000. But my third year in real estate, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was really good money. So what happened between year 2 and year 3 that caused me to basically 10 times my income? Well, what happened was I met a man that taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology and how really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is just that, your mindset and psychology. Only 10 to 20% is the technical knowledge that we talk about on our podcasts. And, fast forward to today, Pavel, I'm blessed to host the largest real estate podcast really in the world for commercial real estate. And I've, in my lifetime, I've owned 2,000 houses that I've rented out long term in 3 states here in the United States. And I now own thousands of apartment units. And in 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might say, wow. And I said, wow. And I got a head so big, I thought I was a real estate god. And when that happens, God or the universe will give you a nice little slap. Well, that was 2008 for me. I ended up losing $50 million conservatively in 2008 and 9. And so really what I'm known for talking about on my podcast, and I do boot camps and things like that as well, what I'm known for talking about is the mindset it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place. And then maybe as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, is the mindset it took to recover from that to the success that I'm blessed to have today. So, that's a topic that we could chat about briefly if you'd like, but happy to take this conversation wherever you'd like to take it. And, let me mention one other thing. You asked me what makes me qualified to speak to your group. Well, so when I started my podcast, once it took off, I used to tell people in the first few episodes, I'll never sell you anything. I just wanted to add value and explain what happened to me in 2008 and 9, because it was the houses back then that pulled me down. My apartment complexes did just fine. If I hadn't mixed them together with debt, I would have been able to keep the apartments. So I had 800 houses at that time, and I had multiple apartment complexes along the Gulf Coast of Florida here. And I ended up losing it all because I packaged them together with debt. But my apartments did just fine. So I started the podcast to tell people, if you're going to buy and hold real estate, it's much better to do, more than one house. It's better to do 2 units, 3 units, 5 units, 10 units, 100 units, whatever it is. And it's much safer. And I used to say, I'll never sell you anything early on. And now I'm a liar because I sell everything. I have courses in coaching, but I never intended to, But anyway, so I now have about 2,000 coaching students around the country here that own, we know it's probably somewhere between 265 and 300,000 units that they own. That we know of. And we know they own over 265,000 units, something I'm very proud of in the 7 years that I've been teaching. And, we're also doing other asset classes as well. So we're doing senior housing. We're doing student housing. My students, I'm doing senior housing personally, but my students do senior housing, student housing, industrial flex space, like an office warehouse space, retail, you name it, mobile home parks. We have mobile home parks here in the United States. I don't know if you have them over there, but all of those things we're doing here. My students are doing, and so and I do big boot camps. I had 1,000 participants in a 3-day event in Orlando, Florida in October, and then I also do virtual events every couple of months. And if any of your students would like to attend one of my virtual events, I'll give them a fantastic deal. But anyway, to answer your question about what qualifies me to speak about this business, that's why I'm answering it that way.
Yep. Your virtual courses will be down in the link below in the description of this video, so everybody can go check them out.
Okay.
And Rod, honestly, after you started speaking in the first section of your talk, before you said what makes me qualified, you had already answered that just by starting off with your story and what you've achieved. And the fact, by the way, it's extremely impressive what kind of wealth you've built. I do not want to underestimate that, but what really needs paying attention to here in what you just said is that you lost over $50 million back in 2008. And then it's 2025 right now, and I'm currently talking to you. You're in quite a modern, beautiful studio, for which, by the way, props for that. And in order to achieve that, it really is a very big requirement to have some kind of a very different mindset. I mean, this is what's really important here. The fact that you've built this portfolio is extremely impressive, but being able to continue living with that after losing 50 million and even growing further than that, that's the real deal right there. So you are more than qualified to speak to our audience. I just wanted you to explain that to them as well. Thank you for that. And by the way, yes, in Bulgaria, we have some kind of mobile home parks, although they are not the same as they're in the US. I can see that this is becoming a trend as of recently. I firstly heard it from Brandon Turner from the Bigger Pockets podcast, and then I hear other people are doing it as well. But something that really, yeah.
I was just going to say, yes, I actually helped Brandon with his mobile home park endeavors because I was going to get into mobile home parks, and I did a whole bunch of work with virtual assistants for about a year, and I gave him all of my data to use, and they've done, his Open Door Capital has done a lot of mobile home parks and apartments as well. But there's an incredible opportunity in apartments, right? Well, especially in the United States right now with the debt that's coming due, and the fact that the interest rates are so high here in the United States. There are a lot of opportunities here because a lot of deals are in trouble. Operators that got adjustable rate interest rates, where the interest rates adjust, ended up, started at 3% interest. Now they're at 8 or 9% interest, and they're struggling, and a lot of deals are in trouble. So there's incredible opportunity here domestically for apartments right now.
Will you be jumping into the action?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's still, there are properties right now that we're seeing trying to be sold for the debt. So, what's owed on those properties. And these are properties that have millions, tens of millions of dollars paid in addition to that debt when they purchase the properties. That's gone. But even just trying to sell them for the debt, they don't make sense. They don't pencil. We call it pencil. They don't make sense financially yet because the interest rates are still too high. So banks are now starting to take big losses. In fact, I just literally got an email this morning about a portfolio in Texas, 700 plus units that are being sold for $25,000 a door. And nothing in Texas was less than $100,000 a door 3 years ago. So, I mean, that's what's starting to happen right now. And so, yeah, here domestically, and I don't know what your market is like in Bulgaria or Spain as it relates to multifamily, what the impact of the interest rates have had. But here in the United States, because our debt was so easy to get, a lot of operators are struggling right now.
I think you might not believe that, but can you guess what the interest rate is in Bulgaria and Spain? By the way, they're pretty similar, at least right now.
I have no idea.
It's below 2%.
Wow. Fantastic. That's fantastic.
It's like the paradise of interest rates right now.
Yeah, we've got a Federal Reserve here, and the chairman and President Trump are at each other's throats right now because he wants them to lower rates, and it's all political, so he's not lowering the rates, and it's a real problem. But well, that's fantastic. Those are fantastic interest rates, and I don't know what your debt is like there, what sorts of loan to values you have in those countries. But that interest rate is fantastic.
It's pretty standard. It's like 70%, 70 to 80, of course, depending on what kind of property you're buying. If it's a multi-family, very big apartment complex, it might get below 70% because just the risk is a little bit higher for the bank, or at least that's how they think in here. The only difference, which actually is a big difference from the US and Bulgaria, is that in the US, banks are with a capitalism mindset. Therefore, I mean that they're looking at the property and what it's going to generate, and they base their risk tolerance on that. While in Bulgaria, they do not particularly base it on that, but on who you are and what your credit history is and what your credit score is. Yeah, basically, they don't.
Candidly, in my opinion, the Bulgarian strategy is risky because, when you have a larger property, in my opinion, the lender should be looking at the property's ability to service the debt, not if that person can service it, because they can't with their own income. So, I think that's actually now, of course, the experience and the financial fortitude of the borrower is relevant. But I'll tell you, in my opinion, the property's ability is even more important, because if they end up taking the property back, that's what's going to pay their debt back. So, yeah, that's just my personal opinion.
Your opinion is correct, because indeed many frauds are happening. People are basically simulating that they're generating a high amount of income just to be able to go to the bank and say, hey, look, I'm making so much money. I'm a sure thing, but they're not actually. So yeah, basically that's a big difference that is firstly limiting people that actually want to do something significant on the market, and it's also creating a higher risk. But we are going to see if things start to change. What we've seen as a trend in Bulgaria is we usually follow what the US is doing just after a few years. So yeah. Yeah, that's just the trend. Okay, Rod, so would you let me know what made you change your path from investing in real estate by yourself only to teaching other people how to do the same thing? Why did you decide to do that?
Sure. Yeah, no, in fact, I never planned to teach. Like I said, when 2008-9 happened, I had 800 houses along the Gulf Coast of Florida here, and I had several apartment complexes. And it was the houses that caused me to crash. And I was only at a 30% loan to value. I only owned 30 cents on every dollar. Yes. And I still crashed and burned. And here's why. Let me give you some examples. So, these were C-class houses, meaning A, B, C, and D. A would be brand new. D would be the ghetto. Okay. These were C. So older houses, tougher tenants, tougher demographic of tenants. The caliber of the tenants in the houses were tougher. And so a lot of maintenance. And my houses were scattered about 2 hours north of me and 2 hours drive south of me and everywhere in between. So logistically, it wasn't the best way to do what I did. I had houses too scattered out. But here's what killed me. So if I had maintenance at one of my apartment complexes, we could stockpile the parts that we need. Plumbing parts, appliance parts, door locks, window locks, things of that nature that we could stockpile at the apartments. And so a maintenance man could go there and fix what was wrong in about an hour and leave. Well, if I had to send a maintenance man to one of my houses that's an hour away, they'd have to go see what's wrong because every house is different. Then they have to go find a hardware store that we have an account and buy parts. And I don't know about you, Pavel, when I try to fix something, I end up going to the hardware store more than once. And that's what happens for maintenance. And so what took an hour at one of my apartment complexes took all day at one of my 800 houses. And so we never really cash flowed that well. But then and of course, Florida has no state income tax. So some of the states in the United States have a federal tax and a state income tax. There's no state income tax in Florida. So the property taxes are higher. So that impacts cash flow. I had properties in wind and flood zones when there's hurricanes in Florida, and so insurance is higher, which impacts cash flow. But what killed me was the maintenance. But then I didn't pay attention to where my tenants worked back then. If they had a good job and they had good credit and they paid a deposit, I allowed them to rent. Well, what I discovered after the crash was I had a lot of contractors in my houses, plumbers, electricians, drywallers, painters, roofers, and that work was gone in 2009. So they didn't have work. And so it was the perfect storm. And And so again, but what I noticed was, yes, I lost everything, and because I'd packaged the houses with my apartments, but my apartments would have survived if I hadn't done that. They pulled back about 11%, but they could have easily survived that crash. And so I started my podcast, I don't know, 9-10 years ago. I'm well over, I think, 1,100 episodes at this point. But I started it just to tell people, again, if you're going to buy and hold real estate, for God's sakes, do multifamily. Don't do single family. Ask me how I know. And so, and like I said, I never planned to do anything. But once I hit 1 million downloads, and I ended up being #1 on iTunes in the education category, the real estate category, and the business category, I was like, maybe I should do something like this. So what I did was, people were at when I started my podcast, I started taking free phone calls from my listeners. I let them set up 30-minute phone calls with me, and talk about anything. I had nothing to sell. I just said, let me help you. I'm happy to help you. I just wanted to add value. And they said, please do something. And so I ended up writing a book, and I wrote a best-selling book. It's called How to Create Lifetime Cash Flow Through Multifamily Properties. And I've given away tens of thousands of copies of this book. I still give it away. Now, the only problem is shipping it internationally is a problem. So maybe what we could do is work something out where I can get you the PDF copy of it. I'll have to ask my team about that, because I've never been on an international podcast before. But here I send it to people if they pay for the shipping and handling, but that'll cost me a fortune if I do it to Bulgaria and Spain. So we'll have to figure out, maybe I can get you a PDF copy. And it became a bestseller in 3 categories. And I've never had even a critical comment about it. Everybody raves about the book. It's really a quality book. But you know what? Remind me, and I'll see if I can just get a PDF copy you can throw in your notes, okay? And then they're like, oh, please do a course or some coaching or something. So it just materialized and just grew and grew and grew. And I never planned to do it. It's you want to make God laugh, you tell him your plans, right? So that's what happened here. But listen, it's been such a blessing. I mean, I've got so many students that are successful at this point, and I literally get love every single day. I get postcards. I've got a wall in my office. I have 6 buildings here in my other office. I have a wall covered with thank you cards. I get gifts, cards, DMs, emails, literally every single day. So it's a blessing.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for letting us know about that. And I wanted to interrupt you there, but of course, I also didn't want to. But what we are currently doing with Bigger Pockets, for example, and other authors as well, is we take the rights to translate the book and distribute it domestically. Domestically for me, meaning Bulgaria, of course, and Spain. So if that's something that you are interested in, or your team, I'm going to continue the conversation after this podcast, so we can see if you will be interested, to translate the book into Bulgarian and Spanish and distribute it to internationally, actually.
That sounds wonderful. Again, I give it away. So I in fact, when I ship it here, they pay $6 or $7. I pay $30 to ship it, just because, it ends up resulting in coaching, sales, and things for me. So it's kind of a way to get people to know who I am. But yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. Even if it doesn't result in anything, that sounds wonderful to have it over there.
Well, actually, the Bird Strategy by David Green from the Bigger Pockets, it became a bestseller here in Bulgaria. We're the only ones to distribute it. We've already sold over 2,500 copies for the last 2 or 3 years. I think we've been selling it, so it's been quite successful. And we have a big audience here in Bulgaria, although I really don't see why you would give it away for free. I know it makes sense in terms financially, in terms of getting a coaching session, but I'm sure that it's packed with value. I do not see that strategy for myself and for our business, but it's obviously worked for you, so maybe I'm missing something. I just can't make myself give so much value for free, if this makes sense.
I undersell everything I do, candidly. My coaching is a fraction of what anyone else charges. And, my competitors, my results are better than all of them combined. So, again, listen, I'm not entirely altruistic, although I have a foundation. In fact, this Saturday, we're giving out 2,000 backpacks filled with school supplies to local children. Literally this coming up Saturday, and I've given away tens of thousands of backpacks. And I've, over the last 25 years, I fed 150,000 children in our area here and provided teddy bears to the local police departments for officers to keep in their vehicles if they encounter a child in a traumatic situation. It's something I'm very proud of. I've done thousands and thousands of those, but I am in the business to make a living as well. So, there is that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. Could you actually elaborate a little bit on the foundation, why you decided to do it, what it does exactly?
Sure. I usually end with that. I kind of jumped the gun, but so I had an epiphany, like a holy cow moment. So when I immigrated, I was in Denver, Colorado, and Denver is in the middle of the United States, but I knew I wanted to live on the beach. So there's no beach. And so I would visualize literally for 20 years living on the beach and the surf and the sand and the waves. And I ultimately ended up building an amazing, really mansion on the beach here in Sarasota, Florida, where I live, where I owned the beach on one side and I had my boats on the backside. It was a slice through an island. And 10,000 square foot home, 3-story home, a magnificent home. I mean, there's a big waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. The pool was in lifestyle magazines, big giant spiral staircase up through the middle of the house, elevator, wine cellar. On the second floor, I had aquariums built around the staircase that were custom made that cost me over $200,000 just for the aquarium. So this gives you an idea of the home. Well, I worked for that for 20 years. And 2 months after I moved in, literally 2 months, 60 days after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night and I'm looking up at this testament to my ego, which is really what it was. I wanted to prove to the world that I mattered. And I got depressed, and I don't mean a little bit. I got really depressed. I'm like, what is going on? I've just achieved success like times 1,000. My beautiful family's inside sleeping. I've got this amazing home. I had the cars, the Maserati, the Mercedes, and, the boats and the jet skis and all the stupid stuff I thought was important. And how could I be depressed? And so when I look back on it, Pablo, there were several things happening. And, one of the things, I spend a lot of time talking about mindset. And one of the things I teach, if you come to one of my boot camps, is goal setting. Because how do you get anything if you don't know what it is? You need to know what it is you want. But here's the key. You need the goals, but the goals aren't going to make you happy. Happiness comes from progress and growth. And I had just achieved a huge goal and I didn't know what I was going to do next. And like the Bible says, without a vision, the people perish. I didn't have a vision for my future. And so that was one piece. The second piece, again, is it's never about the goals. Happiness comes from progress and growth. And I didn't know how I was going to progress beyond that. But the third big piece, which is this leading up to here, is I had been totally focused on me. I got picked on in school when I immigrated to the United States. My mom sent me to school in these wooden shoes right here for show and tell. So I got picked on again, as you can imagine, got beat up a lot and didn't know how to fight back yet. And so I had this belief system that I wasn't good enough. And that's why it caused me to, it was a double-edged sword. It caused me to be very successful, but I didn't believe I was good enough. And so, I had to prove it. And so when that all happened, I went out and got a book by a gentleman named Tony Robbins, who's a local speaker here in the United States, a motivational speaker, very well known. And I went and saw him live and saw that he fed families for the holidays. And I spent 20 years with him after that, by the way. But I was so impressed with that I called my brother, and we have a holiday here called Thanksgiving where we have turkeys. And I'd said, let's find 5 families and feed them for Thanksgiving, because I was going back to Denver for Thanksgiving. And so he called his church and found 5 families. And we bought frozen turkeys and toys for their kids and a whole meal and a whole bunch of stuff for these families. And the third family changed my life. We went up to this shack. It was really a shack that this Hispanic woman was living in with her 5 children. And she came out and saw all the food on the porch and all the things on the porch, and she started crying. Her children came out, and 2 of the older ones started crying, and I started crying, and I was hooked. And like I said, in the last 25 years, I fed over 150,000 children here in my area. For the holidays, I've done tens of thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies. We're doing 2,000 this Saturday. I've done thousands and thousands of teddy bears to local police departments. And listen, this is not me bragging. And for those of you listening, Tony Robbins, this speaker that I'm talking about, calls this dynamic the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Okay. Achievement is a science. If you want to learn how to buy multifamily properties, come to my boot camp. I will teach you. I will give you the map and the blueprint. You just have to go do it. Okay. But fulfillment, so that's achievement, but fulfillment is an art. You have to find out what juices you, what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled. For me, it's children. Maybe for you, it's the elderly, and it is for me as well. I have affinity for the elderly as well. Maybe it's animals for you. Maybe it's the environment. Figure out what fulfills you and give back right now. Don't say, well, Rod, you had money, that's why you gave back. If you want the money, do it, because you'll get the money faster. That's the way God works. The universe works. You get back what you give 100 times. So, figure out what you can do to give back, even if it's just your time, and your success will come much faster. That's why I started my foundation.
That's not advice we get from...
I paid for it all the way through 2008 and 9. I paid it. In 2008, I fed 1,500 families by myself with my out of my pocket. But at that point, then I formed a foundation. Now I take donations, but I cover all the operational expenses. Every dime goes to the food or the backpacks or the teddy bears. But it's been it's just been something I'm very proud of. And if hopefully maybe I'll inspire someone that's listening to do something similar, because it is very, very powerful. And I will tell you, I will have people that I interview here in my studio that have 5,000, 10,000 apartment units, and I can tell that they haven't gotten to that place yet. They haven't evolved to make it not all about themselves. And that's not success. It's not success until you recognize and have an epiphany, like I did, a realization that really life is about giving back. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is something to be proud of. And I will just leave it for people to sink in, because that's not something that you can just talk about immediately. I just wanted to say that this is not advice that we get from any of the people that come to our podcasts. Maybe just a few have talked about that, not in so much depth. And that really goes on to show that you've grown beyond yourself, which I personally haven't done for myself either. I believe that I will, and it's just a decision that I have to make and put my focus there. I'm currently focused on building my own wealth, but of course, as you said, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't go ahead and give to other people. I'm currently doing that only for my family, not for people that I don't know, but I should expand further.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, that's where everybody starts. I bought my parents a house here in the United States and bought them a car, took them on cruises, and it's fantastic. Nothing feels better than that. And you just expand, and that's okay. And I will tell you, even as you're building, if you figure out a way to incorporate giving back in some fashion, not only you will be, a lot of people have been taught to achieve to be happy, right? Like you shouldn't be happy until you've achieved. But if you're giving back, I know this is going to sound goofy and like it's just a play on words, but if you're giving back, you are happily achieving, and you're much more fulfilled and you're much more happy.
Yeah. Thank you, Rod. I didn't think that we were going to talk about that. I saw that you have a foundation, but I didn't think you would go into so much depth. You definitely made me think about it. So thank you for that. But I have my job in front of me and I have to keep talking about the podcast. So I'll just let the people pause the video here and let it sink in. You can go to the bathroom, think about it, and come back later, guys. Okay, so Rod, I would like to rewind a little bit. Sorry for missing the structure of that podcast so much, but of course it's a podcast and we're just speaking. I hope you have some more time. And
I do. No, I'm good. And we're having fun. So let's continue.
Thank you for that. So I would like to rewind a little bit. You mentioned that before the crash, where you lost so much money, basically, you had over 800 single family properties. Now, this is something that we didn't pay as much attention to as we should have, at least I. How do you get to 800 properties, even single family properties? I mean, that's quite a lot of units that you need to own.
One at a time. I didn't buy packages of houses. It was one at a time. And I will tell you, Pavel, every business is nothing but people and systems. If you get those two things right, success is inevitable. Okay. And I'm very good at systems. And so I pretty much bought those houses mostly by myself. My brothers were involved for a period of time. I had employees, but I'm very good with systems. And like the multifamily business, it's a team sport. You have to do it with other people. You're not going to buy a 100-unit complex by yourself. It just doesn't happen. And so, it's much different than single family. But those single family houses, it was just systems. There was, I did bring in some partners at one time when I was in my 20s. And they signed on the debt, and we split them 50-50. I did all the work and I didn't put money in, but I did all the work and we split them 50-50. But for the most part, I did them, and that was just very early on. For the most part, I did them all by myself. And it was just systemizing it. And, and I used private lending initially, to really get things going. And then I used bank financing once I had quite a portfolio. Banks were asking me to loan me money. And so, I was just, it was my whole life for, 30 years. I'm 65. I turned 65 in January, and I started, maybe even, 30 years. So there you go.
So basically, in order to get to 800 properties in 2008, you started back in 78.
When I was 18. I started when I was 18. I bought my first property when I was 18 in Denver, Colorado. I ended up buying 500 houses in Denver, Colorado. And one of the ways that I bought those, by the way, was I would go to people that were in foreclosure, that were losing their property because they couldn't pay the debt. And I would buy those houses, or I would put those houses up for sale. And I literally every night I was in my car driving around, talking to people that were in trouble and helping them, and sometimes buying the houses. And I bought a lot of houses that way. Back then, there were also a lot of government foreclosures, and I was buying those. And I ended up selling all those houses in Denver to buy houses in Florida. But then I lost the Florida houses. But I wish I still had those Denver houses. If I still had those 500 Denver houses, Pavel, I would be netting in my pocket $1 million a month right now. Yeah.
So, just from those.
Yeah, just from those 500 houses. That's how much the rents are there. But that's okay. I mean, listen, I've had a magnificent life, and I will tell you, when you have I call them seminars. I don't call them failures. It's only a failure if you don't get the lesson or you don't get back up. Okay. And I have built lots of businesses in my life. I've built 29 businesses so far in my life, several worth tens of millions of dollars, but most were spectacular, flaming seminars. Okay. Failures, because we fail our way to success. So, if you're listening, don't fear failure. Fear being in the same place you are right now a year or two from now, unless you absolutely love where you are right now. Fear that. Fear regret. I will tell you, there's this nurse in Australia that was a hospice nurse, meaning she took care of patients when they were about to die. And she asked them a question. Her name was Bronnie Ware. And she asked them a question. The question was, do you have any regrets? And she wrote a book that was a bestseller, titled something like The 5 Regrets of Dying. You know what the number one regret was? It was not living the life I could have lived, living someone else's life, not doing what I know I'm capable of. Fear that. Don't fear failure. We fail our way to success, but fear regret like that. Yeah.
Great advice. Yeah, it speaks for itself that you've been acquaintances with Tony Robbins. Actually, we know him here in Bulgaria. He's internationally famous. And we also know Thanksgiving, by the way. We are very familiar with the US culture, traditions, the 4th of July. I mean, things like that. We're aware of them because we look to the US as a guiding point when it comes to business, and it comes with learning the tradition and culture as well. So nice. We're pretty familiar.
Nice.
Okay, Rod, thank you for that. So basically your advice is slow and steady, one at a time, using private lending in the beginning when you didn't have
that's how I did it. I don't know that that's the best way. Actually, that's the long, painful way, candidly. No, I mean, if you can buy more than one at a time. See, I will never buy another house unless it's a third, fourth, fifth house for me to live in. I will never buy another rental house. It makes no sense to me. If I'm going to buy anything, it will always be multifamily because it's safer. When you have a house and it's empty, you're 100% vacant. If you have a 4-unit and you have 1 unit empty, chances are you can still pay the bills. And if you have a 100-unit, you can have 10 or 15 units empty and still pay the bills, or 20 units or 30 units. And so it's just much safer. And so, I don't recommend. Now, most people start with houses. Most of my students started with a house or two, or a 2-unit or a 3-unit or a 4-unit. And then they come to me because they want to go bigger. But I think I did it the slow and hard way. Okay. There are definitely easier ways to build wealth than the way I did it, for sure.
Yeah, but that's the first time, right? Before the 2008 crisis. And then you got the chance, if we reframe it that way, you got the chance to do it all over again. So could you please walk me through the second time when you did that and what you did there?
Well, let's talk about some of the strategies that I implemented, the mindset strategies. I talked about goal setting. And if your listeners, I do a goal setting workshop. It's on my link tree. And my link tree is rodslinks.com, RODSLINKS.com. And the goal setting workshop's at the bottom. Now it's in English, but there's also a guide you can download. Here's the sad reality. People spend more time planning a birthday party or a holiday party than they do designing their lives. Doing your goals is designing your life. So when I lost everything back then, that's the first thing I did. And by the way, if you come to one of my boot camps, that's the first thing we do, virtually or live in person, is goal setting. Because again, how do you get anything if you don't know what it is? You need to know what it is you want and why you want it, because that creates the hunger, the burning desire that you need to have to go take action, to push through fear, to push through any limiting beliefs that you may have, to get uncomfortable. The comfort zone's a nice warm place, and we all know nothing grows there, right? And so you need the goals. And then once you've done your goals, you've got to make a decision. And that's just what I did back then. When I lost everything, I reassociated with my goals, figured out, after I stopped feeling sorry for myself after a few months. But then I reassociated with my goals. I made a decision. Enough is enough. And the Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. If you go, and it doesn't mean dip your toe in the water. It doesn't mean 1 foot in, 1 foot out. When you make a decision, it is done. And then you're like a train on a track. If you're not committed after a decision, then you're going to get knocked off track. So you make a decision. And then the next piece is you got to take the first step. And for me, that was just getting back into real estate, but doing apartments instead of houses. And a lot of people that are analytical are afraid to take that first step. They feel like they need to see the entire pathway before they can make a move. And Dr. Martin Luther King in the United States here said, you take that first step in faith and the next step will be revealed. Lao Tzu, thousands of years ago, said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but you got to take that step. And what I tell people that are, analytical, and the analytical people are very successful in our business, because our business is numbers. I mean, it's primarily empirical. You need to, if you ask all the right questions and you do the numbers right, it's pretty hard to make a big mistake. And I tell them, listen, you can drive all the way across the United States at night with your headlight only seeing 50 feet in front of you, and you know that you can make it. Other people have made it before you. There may be some obstacles, but you can make it. And it's the same analogy for getting into this business. So, and then, another piece would be make sure you play to your strengths. In my business, in the multifamily business, it is a team sport, and there are lots of different positions you can take or hats you can wear. You can be the person that talks to the sellers and the brokers and the investors. You can be the mouthpiece like me, or you could be the analytical person that does the analysis of the properties. And that's a fantastic matchup in this business, is an analytical person with an outgoing person. But, those are some of the pieces that I did when I lost everything. And these are the same strategies you would use to get started in this business as well. So, and I could keep going, but I don't want to just keep talking here.
Oh, actually, if you could, please do, because that's
all right. I'll keep going. Yeah. So pay attention to your focus as well. Okay. I Focus is power, and it's very easy to focus on what you don't want, but whatever you focus on is going to get bigger, positive or negative. Like I'll get people that call me and say, how do I get out of my student loan debt that I borrowed to go to school, my student loans? And I tell them, wrong question. How do you make so much money that those loans don't matter? Okay, that's the right question, okay? They asked Mother Teresa when she was alive if she was anti-war. She said, no, I'm pro-peace. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Focus is power.
Yeah,
the most successful people on the planet have the highest degree of focus. Look at people like Elon Musk, incredible focus. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, incredible focus. Steve Jobs from Apple, incredible focus. And, I listen to 2 podcasts here in the United States. And, my podcast is approaching 30 million downloads. And these 2 podcasts probably get that a week, okay? One of them is called Joe Rogan, and the other one is called Tim Ferriss. And on Tim Ferriss's show, he interviews the best of the best in the world, at least in the United States, best athletes like the swimmer Michael Phelps, or NFL football players, NBA basketball players, billionaires like Ray Dalio here in the United States, very wealthy people, heads of the CEOs of the biggest companies like Zuckerberg for Facebook, actors like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jamie Foxx, Ed Norton, Hugh Jackman. And what he does is he deconstructs their success. And it's fascinating conversation, but I started to hear a pattern. They almost all meditate. What does meditation enhance? Focus, right? Focus is power. So pay attention to your focus. And I said play to your strengths. And the reason I said play to your strengths is when you're playing to your strengths, you're probably loving what you're doing. And when you love what you do, work is play. And when you love what you do, also, you are passionate about it. And to influence people to work with you and invest with you and sell to you, you need passion. So play to your strengths. And I tell my students, hire or align or partner for your weaknesses. You play to your strengths and you hire somebody, or you align with somebody, or you partner with somebody for your weaknesses. That's a match made in heaven. The next piece is your peer group. Who you hang around is who you become. You show me your 3 best friends, I'll show you who you are in your relationships, in your health, in your happiness, and definitely in your finances. Okay. And so and a lot of people will settle for the people they went to school with as their peer group, or the people that they work with. And those people may have their own fears and limiting beliefs that hold you back. Fear of losing you, fear of feeling less than you if you succeed. And sometimes it's family. And I will tell you, proactively choose your peers. Love your family, but proactively choose your peers and who you allow to influence you. Get around people that want more out of life. This is why my coaching program, my warriors, are so incredibly successful, is because that rising tide lifts all ships, right? And see, I want to be around people that think what I think is hard is easy. And I would encourage you listening to do the same thing. Get around people that think what you think is hard is easy. Okay? That's how you succeed. We'll leave it at that.
Awesome, mate. It's just so valuable that I could listen to you all night, but I know you have other work to do. So I'll just keep going with my other questions. So basically you're saying
I've got about 10 minutes, just so you know. I am done in 10. Okay.
I'll just push through it a little bit faster. Okay. Thank you, Rod. So basically you're saying that you recommend investing in multifamily.
Actually, hold on 1 second. Let me just check something real quick. 1 second.
Yeah. All right. That's fine.
1 second. What time is that one? Oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. I have 10 minutes. Yeah, sorry. I thought I'd had a little more, but I don't.
10 minutes is fine. Don't worry about it. Okay. So next question, Rod. You mentioned that multifamily is the best way to go. Many reasons behind it. You gave us a few. We believe in that as well. We are basically investing in multifamily apartment complexes ourselves in Bulgaria and in Spain. What are your tips? And actually, let's start off with the mistakes. What do you think is the most common mistakes people do when investing in multifamily real estate?
Number one is they dabble. They don't take it seriously, and they don't study it, and they don't learn it. That's number one. That's the biggest mistake. Don't do this halfway. If you're going to do it, learn it. Get your butt to my boot camp or go learn somewhere else, but learn whatever it is you're going to do. Number two is they don't get around people that are doing it. You need to have peer groups so you can bounce ideas and take a look at the numbers together and evaluate deals together. You need to be around people that are doing this business because, that minimizes mistakes. And obviously in a larger property like a multifamily, there are more zeros, so, you need to, the mistakes are more painful. And so don't dabble, get around people that are doing this and make sure that you are conservative with your numbers. Don't be aggressive with your estimates of what the property can do, what you think the rents can do, what you think the occupancy will be. Be conservative. Be careful. And then when you're raising money for one of these deals, make sure you raise enough money. Okay, make sure you raise enough money to have operating reserves in the bank. I like to have 6 months of expenses in the bank just in case something happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the top ones right there.
Those are some great tips. And actually, from the mistakes that you most often see, you gave us some extremely important tips. So I will save this question and go to the crystal ball time. So actually what I mean by that is, where do you see the most wealth being generated in real estate in the next 5 years? I mean, do you think that this is still going to be multifamily, maybe industrial properties, maybe mobile home parks? I don't know.
No, actually, I think multifamily is extraordinary opportunity coming, because especially in the United States. Again, I don't know the market in Spain or Bulgaria, but in the United States, there are a lot of distressed assets. And with crisis comes opportunity. And we're facing a crisis in multifamily here in the United States. And so there's incredible opportunity to get discounted deals. So that's here in the United States. Now, I also believe there's incredible opportunity in senior housing. There are 10,000 United States baby boomers, they're called, from World War II that are turning 65 in this country, 10,000 a day. I'm one of them. I turned 65 in January. And so I'm the tip of that. But there are so many opportunities with these baby boomers retiring. There are businesses that can be purchased that they own there, but senior housing is a big one because there's a huge shortage of beds here. And so I don't know what your population demographics look like in Spain and Bulgaria, but here in the United States, if you look at it in a graph, it looks like a rat going through a snake. It's such a huge group of people. The baby boomers have influenced everything in this country, from the suburbs that were built around the cities, diaper sales back when they were babies. I mean, they've impacted everything, and they're going to impact senior housing in a big way. So I actually have a senior housing facility that I'm closing on in 2 weeks, my first one. So I'm getting into that as well. But I love multifamily. It's fantastic, and I believe in it, and people need a place to live, and we've become a country of renters here in the United States because of the interest rates. Houses are so expensive, they're so difficult to buy that the people rent, and so there will always be room for apartments and multifamily. So there you go.
By the way, you don't look 65, my friend. You're obviously taking care of yourself.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay, so next question. I read that you, and I've heard from your podcasts, that you like to plan every single day the night before and every single week on Sunday. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, if you go to rodslinks.com and you do my goal setting workshop, at the end of that workshop, for 15 minutes, I train my planning process. It's a weekly process. I don't have time to do it right now, though. But if you go there, it's very, very powerful. It's how I ran 2 very large companies at the same time, focusing on what matters. So it's on Rod's Links. There's my goal setting workshop. At the end of that is my weekly planning process that I teach at my boot camps, but I included it there, and it's free, and I'm not going to try to sell you anything. So if you want to go there, do your goals and also do that planning process. It's very, very powerful.
Okay, Rod, machine gun segment, and I'm done. So what's the best book that you've read in terms of finance and in terms of real estate? 2 books, if you could give us.
Well, I'm going to give you several books, okay? Because my love language is gifts. There's a book called The 5 Love Languages, and I was blessed to have the author on my podcast. It's because he's in his 80s. He doesn't interview much. That's a great book if you want to know how to love somebody properly. But my love language is gifts. So I give a book called Gary Keller's One Thing. That's a very powerful book, and I had his co-author on the show. It's called The One Thing. Another book is called The Slight Edge. It's about those decisions you make every day that traject your life up or down. They don't mean much that day, but over time, they will propel your life up or down, The Slight Edge. Another book is a book by a gentleman named Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning, about what you do every morning to start your day off properly. Now, as far as finance, Tony Robbins has a couple of fantastic books. Ray Dalio has a great book, The Billionaire Ray Dalio. The titles are escaping me right now, but they both have. Money Master, the game is Tony's. That's his. That's right. His is very good.
Principles by Ray Dalio.
Principles. Thank you. That's a fantastic book. As far as what was the other segment you wanted a book?
Finance and real estate.
Real estate.
Real estate. Well, for God's sakes, get my book. It's really good. It really is. I've never even had somebody give me a critical comment about it. It's always been positive. Usually somebody will say, "Oh, it sucked," or "It was terrible," or something like that. But nobody has ever said anything negative about my book. And we're talking tens of thousands of copies. So yeah.
We have to translate it. Yeah, so that I can read it, right? Although I'm going to be the one that's going to be translating it most likely, but I need an excuse to get the rights because I think it's going to be very valuable. Okay, thank you, Rod. So next question, biggest waste of money in your 20s, in your opinion?
Biggest waste of money?
Yes.
Oh, I did. I have multi-million-dollar watch collection, the Lamborghini, the, stupid stuff that I purchased. I mean, I did all of that. The Maserati, I had a Pantera. You probably don't even know what that is. I had all these exotic cars, just stupid. All that money could have been used to invest. But listen, you go through life and you do these things. But watches is my last remaining vanity. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. The most underrated advice you've ever heard about investing, or you might not have heard.
The most underrated advice about investing is just get freaking started. Don't wait to buy real estate and wait. That to me is everything. There's a reason 90% of the world's millionaires either made it in real estate or invest in real estate. That's a clue. Okay. So at least maybe it's not the world's millionaires, it might be the United States millionaires. I'm not sure on that. I might be misquoting, but definitely 90% of the United States millionaires either made it in real estate or invest in real estate for a lot of reasons, including the tax benefits.
Yeah, I think it's 90% of millionaires internationally, global, because I saw it in a book recently. It's in the long distance real estate investing book by David Green once again. Okay, so next thing, we don't look very much alike, but if you were to imagine that I am young Rod, 18 years old Rod, what advice would you give him?
Go bigger, faster. I ask the same question on my podcast because I want them to hear it from people that have thousands of units. Always go bigger, faster. Okay, yeah, for sure. Okay. And I am out of time, brother. I got to run. Okay.
Yes, this was actually the last question. So thank you so much, Rod, for your time.
It's a pleasure. Let's connect on the book thing. And if there's any way I can help you, please don't ever hesitate. Okay.
Thanks so much, Rod. It's been a pleasure. I wish you a good day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.